Servus, everyone. I'm excited to see you all. It feels like it's been forever for some of you, others I've seen really recently. So today I want to talk about barriers, specifically those of language, and about communication. See, I've spent the past 3 weeks throwing myself into this topic. How? Well, I was here, in Austria. What does that have to do with anything? I hear someone ask. Well, thank you for walking through the frame. Simple. I do not speak German. So, for over 2 weeks, I put myself into a situation where the language barrier seemed to be more like the walls of Rome. That's not to say that this was a bad thing, for it did give me time to think, but I'll get back to that later. First, I want to give a rundown as to what I was actually doing in Austria. I was living for 2 weeks in a little town called St. Lorenzen. It was on the top of a mountain with more cows than people. But more importantly, I was living with these people. Dagmar Reiter, her daughter Julia, Dagmar's boyfriend Michi, and their dog Lilo. Friends of Mr. Gould's, they invited an almost total stranger to live in their home for 2 weeks. But not only that, they took care of me, included me, and made me feel like a part of the family. Lucky for me, Julia and Dagmar spoke English, and Michi and I could get along just fine. Thus, the first barrier was taken down as connections were made, and I was incorporated into the daily routines. Mainly over the 2 weeks, I was spending my time attending the Carnary Gymnasium, the school Julia attends. Following their 7A, i.e. their junior class, and assisting in the 7A and B English classes. Here's what my first day of school looked like. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. Yes, 4:30, and yes, that was every morning I was going to Graz. Coffee was a must. I had half an hour to get ready, but that wasn't all that bad. I got to wake up to this, which it was beautiful. Then it was a drive down the mountain to the train, take the train an hour, hour and a half to Graz, and then breakfast, second cup of coffee, and tram to school. Quick side note, NJ Transit needs to up their game because Austria has them beaten by far. So back to what I was doing. Here's some of the notes on the screen that I took while I was there. My first class ever in the Carnary Gymnasium was French. Oh, wait, that was the train. I don't know French, so that was interesting. My second class was German, and as I've stated before, I don't know German. But actually, the German teacher was really nice, spoke amazing English. For a second, I thought she wasn't German, or Austrian. It was kind of freaky. And she even tried to include me a bit in the class, which was really nice. Then it was math, but it was probability and factorials, which I don't really know. Let's just say I was never so happy as to when a student asked a question about a derivative. Then history, where politics were a big conversation as they were having their elections right as I flew in. Yeah, those were the polls on Sunday, which was the day of the election. It was kind of terrifying because it was an extreme right-wing who was against immigration and was homophobic versus an independent left-wing candidate. Sound familiar? Point being, whenever anyone found out I was American and tried to talk to me, even if it was in German, Trump was a go-to topic. But I digress. Religion followed history, which I find kind of humorous, as well as an interesting examination of Austrian culture, teaching the New Testament and having a cross in every classroom except in science labs. But that's not my project, so again, I digress. English was last period, which was fun because that's when I got to participate. It was a language course, so instead of discussing texts, it was more going over activities and books. I would help with pronunciation and whether or not we actually use terms like that, comparing British English to American English. For example, their unit was on, when I arrived, their unit was on like careers and occupation, and so a word that came up was job, but they pronounced it like job with the CH, and so that we kind of talked about that and how that was a tendency. They also had a laugh when they got me to attempt German. I butchered it. So before I left the US, I had asked members of the Hudson School body about their experiences with language, specifically English. Learning and teaching in a language that was not their first, and how that affected them. I then repeated these questions to the members of the Carnary school body. The consensus seemed to be that learning English was a breeze, which shocked me immensely, having always heard that English is one of the hardest languages to learn. Yet, indeed, I witnessed it all around me. Everyone in the school seemed pretty well versed with the language. And overall, everyone in the class was really welcoming. They took me in, translated for me, told stories, made me feel like a part of the community. Language seemed to be turning into less of a barrier and more of an inconvenience. Sure, I didn't understand what they were saying all the time, but it was clear how they were feeling. My hypothesis going into this was proved correct. Expressions and emotions are international. Just because I do not understand a joke does not mean that I do not know if it is funny, for laughter is universally understood. Anyone can read a smile. Tears are not bound to a people or a country, they are human. The dread of tests is mutually understood by all students, so freaking out over a Latin exam is a shared experience. I also know this because I took it. There's a sense of connectedness, even if I do not share vocabulary with the majority of conversation. But that's not all I came away with from this project. That would be too easy. And in truth, I was surprised at both having this aha moment and at how obvious it was and that I hadn't realized it earlier. At the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned how I had a lot of time to think. Whether it was the long train rides or the moments when I didn't understand anything that was being said in class, I was given many opportunities to be introspective. In these moments, as I rolled my project and my presentation over in my mind, this occurred to me. Communication is not just about language, or vocabulary, or even facial and hand expressions. It is deeper than that. It is even deeper than just emotion. Communication is being earnest, opening up and sharing who you are and what you feel. Someone can appear happy with their body language, and in reality, they are deeply lonely or sad. Communication is about honesty, because where will lies get you? At the least, you will make yourself miserable. I know this from my own personal experience. As you all also know, I can get really emotional. More so, leaving home is a huge challenge for me. I have always been close to my mom and dad. They didn't see this slide yet. And being away from them is always hard for me. That's probably the reason why I stopped going to sleepaway camp. Well, that and Les Mis, but you get the idea. Now, my mom was really sappy in a very sweet way before I left. Sorry, Mom, it's true. She was weepy and melancholy and cried up front of the airport. I was saddened, of course, for I'm so awful at goodbyes. All my friends can attest to that. But for the most part, I had it together. I mean, how could I not? I was going to Austria! About 48 hours later, it hit me. See, I was so tired from traveling that on the first night I slept 16 hours. Then came night 2 and I couldn't fall asleep. I physically felt ill. I was homesick. I called my dad and quietly cried. I didn't want to worry the writers, however, so I kept it to myself, blamed my tiredness on jet lag, which is probably partially true. But then it happened again the next night, and I finally confessed my upset to them. They were beyond understanding, made me tea, hugged me, told me it was all right when I cried. Julia even stayed in the other guest bed that night so I wouldn't have to be alone. It was a moment of pure communication and connectedness, an earnest human relationship. I did not need words, and neither did they, and in that moment, I felt like I was more than just a guest. I really felt a part of the family and that I had forged bonds that would last a lifetime. I opened myself up, let others see how I felt and what I thought, and I was completely understood. Dagmar and Julia understood that what I was facing with all of its barriers was a challenge, not just Austria, but the next steps in my life. Indeed, this trip was never just about Austria, but it took me time to realize. This trip was the start of moving on and growing up. So let me communicate with you as clearly as I can. My language barrier being me unable to articulate all of my thoughts. One of my biggest challenges during my main project was not listening and understanding others, but myself. In 2 weeks of silence, I faced down leaving you, leaving Hudson, my friends, my family, and all of the amazing connections that I have made. I was forced in 2 weeks of silence to come to terms with leaving, and I hate goodbyes. In keeping track of when I would come home, I was counting the days until this project presentation, until prom, until graduation, and then until college. While I know goodbyes are inevitable, I still hate them, but it is my hope, by opening up to you like this, our last few days together can be fun and memorable. For in tandem, when I was honest about my feelings when I was away, I was able to enjoy my adventure much more and make friends and connections, despite the barriers between us, that will last a lifetime. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, who, besides the fact that you weren't able to make a pilgrimage to my dorm room, did you have a chance to buy a gimbal for yourself to wear?
No.
No gimbal?
No.
Oh, too bad.
Translation.
Would you like to invite
Those Austrian
They're like
folk dresses.
300. They're so expensive.
They are.
They're like 800 euros sometimes.
And each state has their own, so you could tell if it's from Tyrol or Steiermark or whatever.
Yeah, no, they're really expensive.
They are. They're very expensive.
Did you do, like, I imagine you did some shopping, and were there barriers to that, to figuring out prices, or just?
No, I mean, my dad equipped me with euros, which was really nice of him. Thank you, Daddy. And
I did not.
money is sort of easy for me to understand enough. It's like, okay, it costs like 273 euros, and you just hand them the 5, and they give you money. Although the coins were really hard. Like, I ended up with so many 1 and 2 euro coins, it drove me insane. And they were everywhere. Like, they were in all my bags and all my pockets, and I didn't know what to do in the end. But yeah, buying things was pretty easy. I got the hang of that, because usually you hand them things, and then you say danke when you're done, and you leave. Darcy?
So a question on sort of the specifics of linguistic differences. German is a language that's known for having many sort of very specific compounded words to express these precise emotions or states. I'm wondering if you ran into any aspects of untranslatability, perhaps, or any words that you couldn't find parallels in English during your time there.
I mean, in many ways, there were a lot of words that I just couldn't like make sense of because of either the speed or like just the kind of word. But what I did find interesting was not only the connections to English, but I heard a lot of like connections to Spanish and Latin, which was kind of weird to pick up on. So I started my presentation with servus, which is, I mean, it comes from Latin automatically. It means like hello, but it comes from like servant and slave in Latin, which I thought was really weird, but also really cool. Yeah?
What's the food like there?
It's good. Pumpkin oil is delicious. And apparently pumpkin seeds are green in Austria. I didn't know that. Yeah, no, it was good food. It wasn't that different in a lot of ways. I mean, they're the classic dishes, but overall, I feel like Western society has kind of all melded together, so food is good everywhere.
You can't beat the bread, though.
Yeah, no, the bread is really good. Yes, Kieran?
What inspired you to make this trip, and also how do you feel that this trip has prepared you for next year?
So, let me think. So what inspired me to go on this trip, in part, was the idea of exploring. Because I'm someone who lives in a bubble. I don't like leaving Hoboken often. Usually friends come to me, and this I took as an opportunity to explore. And I've always loved looking at communication and how we talk, and how emotions are expressed and the depths of that. And so there was an opportunity presented to me by Mr. Gould, and I thought that it would be an experience I needed to have, because I've always been here and centered, and knowing that I was going to college and knowing I'm not good at leaving and not saying goodbye, it presented itself as a moment where I could grow and just start preparing myself for the next stages of my life.
So one of the ways, obviously, that we know that you relate to life is through theater and music. Did you have the opportunity to see any theater, music, or even TV shows that were presented in a language you know, but that you got to experience emotionally anyway?
Well, I didn't get to actually sit and see any shows, but I was presented with a really, really, really cool opportunity in my second week there. So what's really cool is Dagmar works in a costume house, and where they rent out costumes to the theaters and the opera and like other smaller companies. So I got to go and explore the costume house. She literally just like let me loose, and I just wandered the floors and rooms. There's like 3 floors and like probably 15 rooms worth of stuff. It was fantastic. And then afterwards, she escorted me to the opera house, where I got to sit in on a Carmen rehearsal, which was really cool. They let me sing on the stage, which is also really cool. It was somewhere in here, I think. There's a photo of me somewhere dying.
Yeah, with the black.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll find it because, yeah, that was me after they let me sing. I was kind of dying. The set was also really cool, and they let me backstage. It was so much fun.
Is that on the stage or is it?
So this is the stage, and that's backstage. They're doing Carmen like it's a museum, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, that was one of my best experiences, probably. Yeah?
Who won the election?
Correct me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Van der Bern? Van
Well, it's Hofer, the right-wing guy, did not win.
Hofer didn't win. The left wing.
Van der Ellen or something, I think his name is, or something. I haven't watched the Austrian news in a while. I saw it in the paper.
Right.
And I tried to watch it every day.
Although I heard recently that that Hofer's party is trying to like invalidate the election results, which I was like, ah. That'll be interesting. So yeah, but everyone was really relieved. Like we came in on Monday. So
It
yeah,
was very close, though. Surprised.
Yeah, it was,
That's a shocking thing.
I think it was 50.6 to 49.4 was the ending result.
Hofer is from the same party that your pirate was from,
Huh.
the Freedom Party.
Yeah, he's not a nice guy.
Right, I can get about that.
It was also interesting though, because sort of on that, and being that Hofer was like anti-immigration while I was in Graz, on the same day where there was like this women's marathon that was like a 5K, there was also an anti-immigrant rally, and I saw both, and they were kind of like, they weren't quite close, but it was a little scary, but yeah.
Danke schön.